The drug war is a total fraud. A total fraud. Not a proof. It's a whole travesty. Again, I got to state that God's herbs are not immoral. Prohibition is immoral. Back in 1973, the Virginia Law Review took a look at the prohibition history, and they found that Congress had been hoodwinked and hornswaggled. That was a generous term. What in fact Congress heard back in 1937 was little more than hearsay and emotional pleas pandering to the racist culture that existed and still exists to a large extent today. And it was these racist emotional pleas that convinced Congress that white women were in danger of being sympathetic to non-white males and producing mixed-race babies. This is the driving force for the passage of prohibition. It had nothing to do with pharmacology. And if you think this is only from the far left spectrum, I myself am a Goldwater person. I go back a ways. But from Bill Buckley's National Review, I'd like to read a little summary here. The anti-hemp marijuana prohibition campaign is an 80-year-old cancerous tissue of lies. It undermines law enforcement, aggravates the drug problem, enriches organized crime, attacks the individual, cripples free agricultural commerce, cheats the consumer, robs the taxpayer, deprives the sick of needed help, dangerously misleads children, and suckers in well-intentioned conservatives and countless frightened parents. If you wonder why you never hear about presidential drug commission studies, it's not because they're not done. They're done on a regular basis, but they make the mistake of appointing honest people to do the research, honest people that have been misled, and when they take a close look, they find out that it is a hoax. Nobody has ever recommended continuing this counterproductive prohibition. Just as a few other notes of interest here while we're waiting for our main speakers, they can push hemp history back at least 12,000 years to where they used the fiber, that's the world's strongest natural fiber, to make marks on clay pots. That's 12,000 years. More recently, they have it as the original medicinal herb. Some sources quote the first recorded doctor being from China in 2500 BC. It was his favored medicinal herb because he found it very hard to do harm with. So when you see the physician symbol with the wings and the snakes entwining, that staff represents the hemp staff in honor of a doctor that said he didn't want to do any harm. There's a very good book that covers that. It's Marijuana, the First 12,000 Years by E. Abel. Let me briefly just point out a few of the special interests that were involved in hemp prohibition if you haven't come across them before. Bureaucrats and alcohol bureaucrats looking to retrench after the repeal of the Volstead Act when alcohol again became available. Then, of course, the driving force was the oil interest and the Puritan control addicts that definitely didn't want people to experience anything that might be termed pleasurable. Since then, we've had the development of the anti-drug industry, and the alcohol and tobacco have always been on the sidelines with major interest. I've got to say that the research they use for scare tactics is methodologically flawed. It cannot be repeated when they took a close look at it. The famous brain study by Heath was kept under wraps and had to be freed up with the Freedom of Information Act, and without that, we'd never known his methodology was completely bankrupt. He could have used anything and done the same damage to those monkeys. And case after case, it takes years for these hysterical studies to be refuted. So there's always something in the paper, and nobody speaking can ever hope to be up to date because they're constantly manufacturing new problems to keep this old travesty in check. Again, I got to go back to if the Constitution means anything, and it talks about freedom of a religion, there isn't a religion I know of on the planet that doesn't say God created heaven and earth, including all of the plants and other life we see. And for man to arbitrarily impose a ban on God's herbs intended for healing is a anathema. What's the religious word for sin now? Again, folks need help. The people that put this on need help. They need money. They need to help you spread the word. There's some literature over here. You can write the folks that are on the literature. But this is something we have to share because the petrochemical interests are so firmly latched onto this. Literally trillions of dollars will be changing hands when hemp prohibition is finally repealed. And it's going to be going back to the farmers, back to the small communities. We're not going to be concentrating oil wealth and banking wealth. Hemp belongs to the people. It is the premier renewable resource. There's not another plant on the planet, not corn, not sugarcane, that can produce as much biomass as hemp in one season. Produces fiber, strongest natural fiber in the world. Produces pulp, which is essentially cellulose. It produces oil of the highest quality. Most people don't hear about the medicinal uses, but it's also the premier erosion control plant. It was used widely back during the Depression to stem the Dust Bowl. Its roots grow very fast and very deep. Thank you all for turning out today. We've got some more speakers coming up.
Hi, my name is Patrick Quinn. I'm a private child protection worker. I graduated from the school in 1978 from the School of Education. The things that I learned while I was here at school didn't prepare me for the world that I was to meet later on. This plant, the hemp plant, is only an example of the police state that is encroaching upon our freedom in this country. I gave a speech at the Rams Horn, maybe a month ago. And afterwards, two guys came up to me and they told me that their rooms had been ransacked at will by police on this particular campus. I said, why? Why did you let him in? Well, because I was scared of his gun. Well, it's a good reason. I don't understand why people can just come into your room and ransack your room and walk out and say, you have to give me something. This was the story I got. You have to give me something. So he was given a pipe. Big deal. Because they own it. Who owns it? Okay. Yeah, we talked about control. Yeah. It is. It's not real. Ideological. I'm involved in this movement, particularly this legislature, because helicopters started to attack me in August. I couldn't take it. They just kept on coming and coming and coming. So I took out my video camera. This is me and my video camera. It's the only weapon that I ever carried, besides a pen and a typewriter and my word. So I took this video camera and I stood on my hill for 45 minutes and I videotaped this helicopter as it kept coming at me and coming at me. I expected them to start shooting at me pretty soon. But I was in the Vietnam War or something. I was going to dress in black for the occasion. So I went down to the legislature and I spoke to the Audit Program Review Committee. I told them that this is not a good thing to do. And they said, sure, that's right. Hearing, and I came back with someone else who had their children stolen from them. Because they were growing 40 vegetable plants in their closet. Big deal. Human Services didn't want to be involved. They said vegetables aren't illegal. People can grow them and eat them, and that's okay. But the police said that they should kidnap the child and take the child away without the Department of Human Services, and they did. The child got back to the house that same night, but traumatized. For what? For what? I don't get it. It was a vegetable that was grown in their house. This movement, this particular hemp movement, isn't anything about the hemp plant. It's about freedom of the individual rights. People to choose or not to choose. I mean, who is pro-choice? It's to consume what you want to consume. Controlling an individual's consumption is the easiest and best way to control the individual. Eat as much hemp as you want. Grow as much hemp as you want. Tell them it's a vegetable. Tell them it's ginseng. Tell them it's anything like marijuana. Just don't admit it. Say, no, that's not marijuana. Marijuana's against the law. I don't grow marijuana. I grow vegetables. It is a vegetable. Put it in its proper place. But they don't want us to put it in its proper place. They want it in their place. Legislature finally did pass a bill, marijuana bill for medicine. I and a lot of people here today, and a lot of people who should be here today who aren't here, and I want to know why they're not here, worked very hard nonetheless to get this bill passed. It's sitting on the governor's desk, and the governor's going to pocket veto it. He's just going to let it sit there because the DEA and the FDA insist upon having marijuana on a Schedule I drug when it should be a Schedule II drug. Marijuana is definitely used for chemotherapy. I mean, everybody knows it's an antidepressant. It makes people smile. It makes food taste very good. I mean, really. There you go. Hey. So what the hell is wrong with that? I don't get it. Just sitting on the governor's desk right now. He's trying to work on a program with the Veterans Administration. I'm a social worker, like I said. And I'm trying to work on a program with the Veterans Administration to get them to put in a marijuana research program for guys who have post-traumatic stress disorder. The guys from Vietnam are still suffering greatly from that war, and now the guys who came back from Desert Storm, I didn't agree with the war, but I'm not against the guys who fought it, believe me. I feel bad for them. Well, they came back from Desert Storm, and they have leishmania. So, leishmania is from a sandfly. They got bit, they got this leishmania, it's a parasite, now they can't give blood. They're lepers. Their blood is tainted. You go to the Red Cross and you say, I spent some time in the Middle East during the Persian Gulf War, and they say, well, we don't want your blood, thank you. There are guys and women, 3% of the people who were killed were women, 4%. Biggest ever. Hey, we've come a long way. There's guys and girls now who are having these dizziness, these spells, all due to the anthrax is what they're talking about now. The guys who say, no, I think it's because they gave us anthrax. Hi, Terry. Okay. Thanks. I think we're going to start another war. And these hemp issues. Plant some anywhere we want. Don't call it anything that's illegal. Say it's a vegetable. Eat the thing, civil liberties, and most of all, think of the jail. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my turn and I'm mad. My ignorance about this whole matter, as I said last night, was almost total. They tell me these students came and did something as they've been doing for years about my education. And then, for God's sake, I discovered that what they call marijuana has been called hemp and salsa, and my grandmother, for God's sake, had it in tea most of her life. And she was the most gung-ho, unreasonable Christian among gung-ho, unreasonable Christians. Well, I didn't get mad. I don't need any of it myself because, as I said also last night, a cup of tea gets me turned on. Or an idea, for that matter. But the idea that got me now is that miserable, dirty, unspeakable, obscene wretch by the name of Bush. You know what I discovered was some of the books the students brought to me? And it's from the New York Times. That miserable wretch is a major owner in the Lilly, what's his name, 3-4 names I forget, pharmaceutical countries, and that's his whole fortune. And that miserable Quayle family owns it, and that's why that moron is vice president of the United States. Well, then you find out, for God's sake, that this whole drug war is costing billions of dollars, upsetting Middle East countries, Peru, Colombia, costing $150 billion or at least more in the United States tax companies, so that the miserable wretch can make more money. I'm mad. And that's why my education says it doesn't do anybody any harm at all. Well, I believe in freedom. I don't want anybody to mess with me, and I don't want anybody doing things for my own good. I grew up with a bunch of people who spent their time doing things for my own good, and I'll take care of that myself. Yeah. My good friend Allen Ginsberg is here to say a few words for you now.
I've been interested in the political implications of pot and other drug prohibition since about 1945, when with William Burroughs and Jack explored the lumpen proletariat areas of Times Square and met some junkies and tried marijuana for the first time, and then later on went on to try the prohibition of marijuana. Is pretty interesting. A lot more about it than I know now because I'm getting old and senile. Back to the early parts of, we got a little feedback, is it needed? Back to the end of World War I, 1918 or 1919. It all did begin with who was a representative in the New York State Legislature, got up and denounced it as being a fraudulent bill for prohibition to get more currency on the free market. But having prohibited the sale over the counter and having discouraged doctors who were already addicted, and so by 1920 there were prison habits with medical requirements who were thrown into the black market, and that was the beginning of the great need in America. The black market grew up. With the black market, there was a financial percentage to that work, is that a junkie who couldn't maintain his habit had to go out on the street to work. He might get beat for his money, or he might get sold milk sugars, with people maintaining their taking out the black market and reducing the price within the whole junk. So, during the war on drugs, from 1945 to now, I've been thinking about the problem and reading about it, studying it somewhat, separate out all the drugs, because the idea of lumping everything together as narcotics began and becoming brainwash and manipulation. Recognize what are the real dangers of drugs. Now, statistically, drugs, which is probably strychnine-laced heroin or speed and amphetamine, are responsible for the deaths of 20 to 30,000 people a year in the United States. So there is some problem, and anybody who knows a crackhead or an amphetamine head or a coke head, the hospital of AA in Minneapolis are hardly any places where people who are strung out on drugs can live facilities usually available for medical treatment of addiction are 20 to 40,000 a year in America. 100,000 people a year in America die of alcohol. It's over twice as many people who die of illicit drugs. And 1,000 people a year die of use of nicotine and blood pressure. So the real drug problem in America is Jesse Helms's tobacco. And Joseph Coors' alcohol. And as you may have noticed, Coors spends his alcohol profits on the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., a right-wing think tank, which provides Jesse Helms the legal packages and legislative thinking for his bills on such topics. So it's almost as if you have a lineup of alcohol and tobacco against sort of free thought, eros, liberty, alcohol and tobacco setting themselves, their representatives setting themselves up as moral arbiters of the United States. The solution to the problem then would be to legalize hemp as a cash crop for the failing family farm. If you remember, the image of the conservative America was the family farm Thanksgiving dinner on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. Under the last few neoconservative administrations, the family farm has diminished. There are fewer and fewer viable family farms. The land is not being used properly, and people are being driven into the cities, where it creates more anxiety, more pressure, more drug addiction.
Yes.
So an ecologically, population, in terms of population ecology, cultivation of the family farm and re-inhabitation of the countryside would be a sensible thing, and hemp as a cash crop would provide a viable economic mode for people to go back to the country. And was such a mode during the 60s and 70s, when many people in New England and in California went back to commune farming and family farming, and illicit hemp growth, marijuana growth, was the economic sustenance for maintaining such farms. Then came the helicopters and the heavy police state activity, the what do you call the kind of wars that they put on in Peru? Counterinsurgency wars against our own population in the countryside. Helicopters descending on marijuana plots with infrared sensor arrays in Nevada County, California, so that a whole group of intellectuals and ecologists and woodsmen there were busted and tied up, had all their energy and their money tied up for years trying to deal with a rapacious drug bureaucracy, which costs $12 billion a year as of now, which itself is involved from top to bottom in the illicit peddling of drugs, and has always been. That's another thing that has to be taken into account, that from the narc on the street all the way up to the head of the war on drugs, Bush, working with Noriega, there has been corruption always, and the government has been involved in using the proceeds of illicit drug trafficking for funding off-the-shelf military operations, as we found in Vietnam, when the CIA was working with opium-producing and transport Mio tribesmen in order to win them over to fight against the commies. As we found after World War I, when Lucky Luciano was let out of jail in New York as they to take over the Sicilian drug trafficking through Marseille and Mediterranean drug trafficking. Luciano was the head. We let him out of jail in order to mobilize the mafia to fight the commie partisans in Sicily who had won the war against Mussolini and Hitler. But then we didn't want them to have power, so we let the mafia loose on them after World War I. So that's how Marseille and Mediterranean got to be the center of drug trafficking, from the Corsican Union in the Far East, in Saigon and Indochina. The Corsican Union, of course, had always been the drug lords in transshipment. So from Indochina to Marseille to Cuba to New York, CIA was involved in using helicopters and making it. In fact, Santos Traficante, who was also involved somewhat with the Kennedy for opium trafficking. Well, the point of this is that the CIA and upper echelons of government have been using the proceeds of drug trafficking. Not only, as you may remember, was also the situation with Contras, where Contras were being sustained by Felix Rodriguez, a CIA head, and Gregg, who was Vice President Bush's foreign policy advisor, including the Bush administration, and Bush as head of CIA, as you mentioned, the drug trafficker, 200 $100,000 a year. So there is obviously some cognizance of the drug trafficking then, as there is cognizance now that the replacement for Noriega, our puppet guy in Panama, has allowed the drug trafficking to go on even in a greater scale than when Noriega was in. So what is all that about? Nobody knows. Actually, it's quite mysterious. Nobody knows the deals, the secret deals, the double crossing that are going on in the upper echelons. But what we do know is that the narcotics cops on the beat, on the street, have always been involved in stealing from drug traffickers the bulk of the evidence that would be put into court, presenting only maybe a fifth of that of the seized drugs in court, and peddling the rest of it on full agent finks whom they have on a string to addicts who are used to bust other addicts. 95% of drug arrests are done this way. The officer has a couple of addicts on whom he feeds drugs. These addicts go out and make scores. They finger drug dealers, whether they're large scale or small scale. There are tests in which the narcs seize, say, a pound of. For this information is the NAP Commission report of 20 years ago in New York City, which pointed out that corruption has been endemic through narcotics bureaus for at least a quarter of a century. And since that time, 1970-71, when David Burnham did a series of articles in the New York Times pointing out the corruption in the drug police in New York, the Special Investigative Unit of New York's Narcotics Bureau, the key nerve center of drug surveillance, pointed out Burnham in the Times, and the NAP Commission formed out of the Times articles to investigate Burnham's accusations, found that the head of the Special Investigative Unit of New York Narcotics Bureau had been put in place by the Mafia 3 times successively, and that peddling by the New York Narcotics Bureau, the largest in America, was epidemic. So what are the solutions to the problem? First, as I said, legalization or decriminalization of grass or hemp as a economic backbone for the failing family farm. Then, the next thing is, what do you do about junkies? You treat junkies the way you treat alcoholics. What we need is to transfer the billions of dollars that are being spent on prisons and police and surveillance equipment to rehabilitation units in hospitals for people who want to get off junk. If somebody can be cured and is willing to be cured, then treat it as a medical problem. If it is not possible to cure someone, then you have to give them maintenance. It's just simple as that. And those who have maintenance, as with methadone, which is a little bit worse than regular opium in terms of the depth of the habit, those who have methadone maintenance have turned out to be workably social citizens who can maintain jobs. You can also do that on opiates or on morphine or on heroin. There have been a lot of studies on that, and you'll notice that in China, in India, formerly in China and now in India, rickshaw drivers who work very hard are also addicted to opium, and the largest single professional group addicted to the opiates are doctors, actually, in practice. The largest professional group, able to maintain their practices as long as there is a steady supply. It's the unsteadiness of the supply of opiates that causes the social dislocation, the irresponsibility, the stealing. If you haven't got money to feed your habit and you can't maintain a regular job because your supply is too unsteady, naturally you're going to be a social outcast, stealing from your grandmother's ass, getting a suppository in order to maintain your habit, as Burroughs points out in Naked Lunch. So, what's the conclusion? If you separate out junk, separate out hemp, what have you got left? Those were the foundations of the Narcotics Bureau's bureaucratic power, the foundations of the war on drugs, the foundations of the hysteria. Both bad cases, both police state laws, so that junkies were treated like Jews in Nazi Germany, hunted down with guns instead of being put into hospitals or maintained by doctors with an illness. once you've eliminated the hemp and the junk problem, then you can take a look at what do you do with the really difficult drugs, the ones that do cause psychosis, amphetamine and crack and cocaine. I don't think you can solve those problems unless you first dissolve the foundation of the narcotics bureaucracy and its police state, neo-fascist, neo-conservative lobby. So as Noam Chomsky pointed out, the war on drugs seems to be an excuse for creating a surveillance state inside the United States to keep track of those people who are mentally dissident or disaffiliated from the central government enough to form an opposition. It is harmful that a good deal of the energy of the anti-Vietnam War effort was catalyzed by students' experience of another version of reality when they dropped LSD. And LSD, I would say, from my own experience, is one of the major catalysts for what you might call individuation from the womb of the government and the mass mind control. Certainly, my own experience of disaffiliation or suspicion of government comes from my very first experience of marijuana. About marijuana driving you mad and driving to the bug house and causing dogs to go crazy and frog at the mouth in Algeria, free from madness. And then I smoked some pot in 1945, and I had a black and white sundae, vanilla ice cream with chocolate syrup, and it was the virgin kicks of marijuana don't really last, especially if you use it too much. It's better to preserve its use. Special study occasions like going to the Museum of Modern Art to look at Van Gogh. I never exactly did like the partying use of drugs because I thought they were more useful for expansion of consciousness, of the internal processes or texture of consciousness. And I think both marijuana and the psychedelics, it becomes a threat to the state when people become aware. Like the sexual revolution, the drug revolution is opposed by the status quo, opposed by controllers, opposed by police, opposed by the tobacco interests, opposed by liquor interests, opposed by neoconservative cocoons, stay in your home moral minority, mainly because it causes you to question reality and to begin examining the varieties of reality and take a more external nature, and has led to the ecological movement, among other things. I think that LSD was a catalyst in the 60s toward the recognition of the unified field of nature, and the fact that we had to take care of this fresh planet rather than burn it down. So, you have a combination of interest in a special limited consciousness, a moralistic, monotheistic, totalitarian consciousness, trying to suppress the drugs, creating a larger and larger surveillance bureaucracy with more and more high-tech intrusions on your privacy and on your lives in the area of what substances you can ingest. And I think the issue, in some very odd way, because of its intersection with CIA activity, the intersection of CIA with mafia, the mutual interests they have, the intersection of drug and alcohol interests with neoconservative the intersection of tobacco and alcohol interests with neoconservative and fundamentalism makes a very complicated situation politically and socially and culturally in the United States. And it seems to me that, oddly enough, the lowly issue of hemp is strangely symbolic of a larger cultural problem and a deep political problem, in that once people get a little more hip about drugs, and a little more tolerant about decent behavior and a little more compassionate in medical terms about people who are ill and addicted to drugs. Until that happens, we won't have a clear America, and we're going to have a greater and greater police state, Latin America, and at home, a way of sustaining secret police activities, as William S. Burroughs, the eminent drug authority, said in the movie Drugstore Cowboy, the war on drugs is an excuse for the maintenance of an international apparatus. Thank you.
And I just want to say a couple of things because something else. The leader writes to John McKernan at the State House and having signed into law legislative document 2420, which is the marijuana bill. Right now it's languishing in his inbox, and there are two ways he can get it into his outbox. One is with his signature and one is with a rubber stamp. Let him know that you want him to put his signature on it, okay? And it just pays just the price of a stamp and 30 seconds of writing on a postcard, you know, a minute if you want to use an envelope. You know, and there's not very long to do that, otherwise a pocket veto comes into effect. The legislative session is over, and if he doesn't sign it into law within, I think it's 90 days, it might be less, it's just automatically vetoed. Okay? So just John McKernan, the State House, Augusta, Maine. You don't need the zip code. You really don't. It'll reach there without the zip code. I can't remember it anyway. But the name of the document, once again, is Legislative Document 2420. LD 2420. Can I hear it?
LD 2420.
Okay, thank you. And just one thing, something Alan was saying about the corruption of the Narcotics Bureau just reminded me of this funny story. Anyone here, you've all heard of Joe McCarthy, right? You know, the freedom fighter from the 50s. And he was maintaining on an opium habit for 10 years. He was getting his opium, his heroin, from the Bureau of Narcotics. He was getting it personally from Harry J. Anslinger, the director of the Bureau of Narcotics. Harry Anslinger admitted that he had given Joe McCarthy heroin to maintain his habit, and he said he would do it again, because he said that action prevented communist government from playing Joe McCarthy like a pawn by holding his addiction over his head. Okay? So think about how politics really enters into the question there. Where if you're a great politician and your addiction is a medical problem, but if you're just anyone else, your addiction is a criminal offense. Okay? So, just bear that in mind. And it's LD 2420. Tell him to sign it into law. If all of you send a letter, I mean, maybe he'll expect it, maybe he won't. Maybe he'll watch it tonight, maybe he won't. I have a feeling he doesn't. But write it anyway, okay? And now, something else.
Hi. Thank you all for coming. This is a hell of a lot of people for the amount of work that we were able to put into this. In the starkest of terms, our occupational government has declared war on us, but I want to remind you, like Pat said, our primary weapons are our cameras and our knowledge. And you're going to have to buy your camera, but there's plenty of knowledge up here on this table. Take as many leaflets as you can use and no more. Read them and pass them on and leave a donation if you can. And one of our secondary weapons are these little seeds. And if you have a sterile one that you may have picked up here, or if you have a fertile one, or if you don't have one at all, you can pretend that you have one. And now hold them up, and we're going to symbolically revitalize the global economy and save the environment. Everybody hold up your seeds and put them down into the ground at your feet. And now, if people have short statements that they'd like to make, the microphone is going to be open. Please keep them brief and keep them clean.
Hey, I'm a student like most of y'all, and I only know what I see. And I see people in my family and everybody else's family dying of R.J. Reynolds products, and I see people on the news every day dying of Coors and Anheuser-Busch's products. And I did a lot of research in this mysterious hemp plant, and the highest casualty rate was 2 people. And I think hemp was invented long before alcohol was. There's something terribly wrong here. The earth provides us with everything we wear and enjoy. It also provides us with one particular plant that happens to be very enjoyable and very helpful in this society, but it's being denied to us. There's something wrong. People drink beer and they go to college and there's drunken brawls and there's alcoholics. I've never heard of a potaholic and I've never heard of a pot brawl. People just sit around and talk about it. These people who like their alcohol and their alcohol brawls, they eventually work their way into government and they see us as different. Why are we so scary? Because we don't like to fight? Well, it would be a shame if nobody wanted to fight anymore, wouldn't it? There would be no more death and no more war. So you got to think about what's going on here, the tangible facts. Thank you.
Yo, maximum respect. This one I'm talking from the perspective of the Jamaicans still. Because for a longer time, the hemp has been contributing to our national, whatever it may be. Thousands and thousands of dollars we get from that thing there. Since they cut it out, now we have a problem with foreign exchange. Only thing I can say to the government, if they want to solve some of the national budget deficit here, legalize it and tax the fuck out of it. Simple as that.
This is about our rights. This is about our freedom. I wasn't a student last year, but I used to come up here to the university to visit and get to know the place. And when I came up here, there was a smoking lounge at the Memorial Union. And I smoked cigarettes. And I came back to school up here to start going to school at the University of Maine. And that was gone. They took that away from us when we weren't looking. And that's what they're doing here. They're trying to change your mind and make you see this a little differently than what it is. They're taking you to look somewhere else and be somewhere else with your mind so they can make this illegal. We need to change that. That's all I've got to say.
I'd like to remind everyone that America began as a project for social deviancy and that we should just keep that up. That's what it's about. To wrap this thing up a little bit is that there have been some meetings that have taken place in the Ramshorn to get this thing together. Given the turnout we have here, it's pretty amazing because everything was pretty ad hoc, you know, a bunch of people met, sat around, talked a little bit, then next week, and then next week, and then all of a sudden here it is. It was pretty easy to do, and it was pretty easy to get the momentum together. We can do something like this, we can do something bigger, we can do this again. Ideas that have been kicked around are like having Dr. Dana debate some of the people from Starks. There's all sorts of things that can be done. It just takes a little bit of initiative. And people should get together and talk about it. There'll be some people up near this table afterwards. If you have ideas, let's try and trade them around. Let's not let this be the end of it. Let's just have this be a step. You know, a revolution takes place in steps. The whole big thing can't happen at once. It just goes step by step.
Just a minor commentary on some of the reasons it's probably illegal. It's kind of hard to grow your tobacco for your cigarettes in your backyard or beer brewing.
The issue of victimless crime.
Actually, he's talking about
Dave. Crimes involving one's private property, one's body, in one's own time was originally illegal under the common law system that the United States was founded under. Under common law justice, a human being in order to be brought to court and held accountable for charges of hurt another human being or into their property. As you see, a lot of the laws of our present time have nothing to do with that. For example, marijuana, prostitution, any crime that there is no obvious victim of, even for speeding tickets. The reason that these laws can be pulled on us, and the prosecution of these laws can be pulled on us, so we can be sent to jail for a number of years for effectively hurting no one and destroying no one's property. Private owners
Hemp rally, Friday, April 17th, 1992, University of Maine in front of the Union. Special speaker, Ginsberg.